What do you want me to say?
How to rescue people.
How to rescue people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to rescue yourself, really. I'm standing in a place where the Kingdom of Norway was founded, I believe, right?
Sort of.
That was amalgamated or grouped, 1,000 years ago?
Harald Hårfagre, but I don't think he actually managed to collect all of Norway, but it was the beginning.
Yeah, this fabulous sculpture here, which is huge. It reminds me of the King Arthur legend, you know, the sword and the stone. That idea. I don't know, I guess... Let me come. Freedom. How to walk out of hell. Well, hell only has one way in and one way out. And if you're brought into hell, I guess it's not your fault. Very few of us actually walk into hell. I don't buy this idea that we're all clueless victims or we're all either volunteers. I think it's a mixture of both. I think the devil knocks on the door and brings you in. The way you get it, the only way to leave hell is to go cold turkey, is to completely leave it. And that means leaving everything behind, everything you've believed about your government, everything you've believed about politics, everything you've believed about yourself. That's probably even more important, that you get rid of that. Because the day will come when you look at yourself in the mirror and you'll say to yourself, well, who am I? Who am I really? You know, who am I really? Am I a guy who lives in the suburbs, works as a construction engineer? Is that who I really am below that? Or is that just are they all just a collection of labels and baggage? And then you start to look closely. Actually, you don't even have to look that closely. You just look below the surface and you realize that that's exactly what you are. You are confusing the ghost of who you are for who you are, and that's not who you are. That's the ghost. What you are is the person or the soul below the labels, below the baggage, below the names, the numbers, the tax numbers, serial numbers, passports. You're below that. You're hidden. You're almost camouflaged by the system, so you don't see yourself. You don't actually see who yourself is, and that's the path to freedom. I think is the first. You cannot save anything unless you save yourself first. And the first route to salvation is actually looking at yourself honestly and saying, well, who am I really? What do I really believe? Or am I just carrying assumptions and programming that's been given to me? And I think if a person does that and doesn't go any further, they're awake. They're free. And from that point on, it's incremental stages of freedom. You can choose to go back into society, work in your office, work in your bank. You can go back into society, go back into your banks, go back into your offices, your factories, your workplace, and still have a rebel heart. And that's a beautiful feeling too, because you're in the system but you're not of the system. And you can finally find ways to subvert it and free yourself. Or you can go the complete full hog and become a freeman or a sovereign or anything you want to do. Or just run away and become free and live in the woods. It doesn't matter. Once you're free in here, that's it. Everything else on top of that is an option. And the first thing you have to do to become free is to look at yourself in the mirror and say, who the fuck am I? Hello and welcome to episode number 29 of The Velocity of Now, here on the Type 1 Radio Network. My name is Thomas Sheridan, and as usual, on every Sunday night between 7 and 9 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, I host a show here that a lot of people have been tuning into and listening to and been giving me very good comments on, mainly because I try to do something a little different than the usual alternative radio that's out there. I present a program that if I was listening to a show, basically this is what I would like to hear. So that's the main reason I did this, and the main reason I did this show was for that reason. And it seems to be making a lot of people happy and interested and tuned in and switched on. That's great, because ideas and information really are the only capital that we have at the moment to solve the problems in this world. That and our sense of humor and our ability to stay grounded is how we will defeat the psychopathic control grid, not through throwing bottles and screaming and waving flags down a government building, but by kind of a consciousness anarchy that will just walk away and refuse to have our psyche governed by these madmen and mad women of the psychopathic control grid. My website is www.tomicals this week, including Site and Click blog. That's there. If you want to help me out by buying a book, I would love that. That's knowledge is power. Keeps me going. And also, even if you don't have any money, you can't buy a book, just even share the website articles. That helps a lot too as well, because this is it. We're really, it's balls to the wall time in a lot of ways. And that's been brought home to me this week, about with the flooding even more. I'll talk about that in a minute. The theme of today's show, we don't always have a theme here on the Velocity of Now, but sometimes it happens by osmosis. I was on the Type 1 News Bong last night, and we got talking about Shirley Temple, and then it swung around the Temple Black and the Black Temple, and became a very kind of interesting esoteric tangent. And so it got me thinking about the dark side of America, the dark side of the American ideal. And I'll talk about that after the 7:30 hour, after the first half an hour, after the first song. And that'll basically be the theme for the rest of the song. As some of you know, I spent many years living in America. And my time there was I basically explored America the way an explorer who'd been in an uncharted country before has explored the place. I tend to do that anyway. When I go to any country, I have the obligatory look around the capital city, the museums and the art galleries, and then I shag off into the hinterlands, because there the real story is often found. And I often travel with a kind of a Fortean paranormal, psychological, archetypal, Spike Milligan even pair of goggles that lets me explore the underbelly of a country. And so this will be what this show is about. And after the first half an hour, this week, someone called Chester Watson, he's on YouTube, and he made a wonderful video promo for the show with people in the 1930s looking and radio sets bobbing their heads to the theme song. And he did a wonderful job, and I didn't even have to ask him to do it. He just did it by just to be a fan of the show. And I love stuff like that. And it's inspired me to actually try and make the YouTube versions of the archives of the show a little better. So I'll make them different, so there'll be a reason to go there too. I'll record a little few minute section at the beginning of it that's not on this radio show. Maybe a little vignette, a visit to a historic location, me telling a joke, that kind of thing. A little bit of wisdom, maybe a bit of fun, and then I'll put that at the beginning of each of the YouTube archives, just to make them different and give them a little kind of sweetened flavor that's not on the podcast. So thank you, Chester Watson, for that. Doing the AB5 conference in Daventry
That's in the English Midlands near Northampton. I'm trying to organise a couple of dates either side of that, dealing with different topics, maybe kind of little workshopy kind of things for small numbers of people. That's going to happen. Also, at the end of March, I'm doing a stand-up comedy event in Dublin, which will be a charity fundraiser for a boy with autism. And the details of that to be announced, but it'll be a Monday night. It'll be after St. Patrick's Day. It's in Whelan's, which is a very famous, very big music venue in central Dublin. And myself and some other people will be doing this charity event. And it'll be a while since I did like a stand-up comedy show. So when more details come of that, keep the Mondays after St. Paddy's Day, if you live in Dublin or on the east coast of Ireland, free for that, because it's only going to be a fiver in, and it's for a good cause, and it'll be a good night of laughs, I'm sure. Now, I also this week, I put up the artwork for the upcoming book. I'm not going to reveal the title yet, but it came to me in the last few days. The book will basically be everything I've spoken about in the last 4 years and written about, overlaid on a kind of a historic template. It'll be a psychological, archetypal, mystical, pathological, historical view of history, and on top of that, showing that where we've come from doesn't necessarily mean that won't happen again in the future. So it'll be a documentation of the past, of what went wrong, and it'll also be a primer for the future. Too much away now, but the painting I did, it has a picture of Adolf Hitler on the cover. He's basically painted as a demon and a kind of a gargoyle. It's based on a quite well-known brown shirt poster from the early 1930s. I just completed. I finished the flag. I painted him a bit thinner with more of a cartoon character, and I put the SS rune of death up in the corner because, believe it or not, folks, the Nazis won. The Nazis won World War II. The Germans lost World War II, but the Nazis won. And they're still winning, and they're still involved in Lebensraum, and they're still involved in ethnic cleansing, and they're still involved in racial hygiene. It's all still there. The Lords of Perception, who are still the same Nazis, just changed the terms of reference. This is what they do. These people are wordsmiths. Remember, magic, the actual concept of magic is built upon the idea of altering the consciousness of another human being to change their will, change their consciousness in conformity with the will. So all they have to do is tell you things like, well, it's not eugenics, it's Planned Parenthood, that kind of thing. It's not global warming, it's climate change. It's not the Holocaust, it's population management. It's not Lebensraum, it's Agenda 21, and so on. You see, people are so stupid. We're an idiotic race. We really are. We're an idiotic species. We're an idiotic species because of public education and national schooling and government schooling is designed to make us as idiotic as possible. So we actually think in actual literal terms as we enter into the cult of the psychopathic control grid. Now let's talk about this for a second before I go on further. I saw a poster, a meme on this week on Facebook, and it said it had a picture of sheet music. I think it was Mozart's The Magic Flute, ironically, the Freemasonic opera, and it said on it like this kind of usual superficial cushy mushy meme, and it said music belongs in public schools, and I wrote underneath it, and children don't, and that's how I feel about it. The meme thing has gone really mad on Facebook. People who think they're woken up are sharing the most bizarre memes that are actually counteracting what they actually post about most of the time. My favorite one is the constant sharing of the Carl Sagan memes by people who think they're spiritual, or even these new age types. They share Carl Sagan memes, and the memes are like, they've seen the Pale Blue Dot video on YouTube, and they think, he's a spiritual science man, he's just like us, and all this kind of thing. Carl Sagan was just like Richard Dawkins, for Christ's sake. He wrote a book called The Demon Haunted World. He basically said that anyone even remotely interested in the paranormal, anyway interested in the alternative, looking ways at things that aren't hardcore science, he came out and said they were all mad. And the book is an absolute pile of utter rubbish. And it's supposed to be this like skeptic's yardstick. For instance, in the book he claims that all the crop circles, not just some of the crop circles, all the crop circles in England were made by two guys called Doug and Dave, who were two like chaps that were down in Somerset somewhere, or Wiltshire, who had a plank and a few strings and did a little demonstration for the Daily Mail. He claimed they did them all, even the most complex ones. There was no other artists and no other, ways of doing it involved. And so people have to stop. I've nothing against Carl Sagan except that he was a massive pothead. People don't know that about him. Carl Sagan smoked industrial amounts of weed. That's when he wasn't driving his Ferrari around the campus. And apparently he was a cool guy, nice enough guy, but he had no time for anything in the alternative, anything outside the mainstream and hard science. So I'm really amazed at these people sharing these Carl Sagan things, going, oh, he's so spiritual. He's so spiritual. He's in his ass spiritual. Yeah, he riled against all that stuff. And I think, the film Contact is all about him saying, we're meeting aliens. Oh, it's all mystical. The mystical scenes in the book Contact are all about dreams. They're not like, he's not saying it's real. People who are forced to call other people sheeple are often the biggest dopes themselves. But anyway, I'll tell you one thing I did like about that book, Contact, was how it starts off, the first transmission going into space was Adolf Hitler. I thought that was a pretty interesting idea. I mean, I quite like a lot of stuff Carl Sagan did. He was an articulate man, but at the end he was just like, he's like what Graham Hancock has become, just sort of like a highly articulate, like, pothead or druggie or something. I'm sorry, I used to love Graham Hancock's work, but sadly that's how he's gone. So... Anyway, that was funny. Now, the floodings, okay, Lebensraum, the clearing, the living space. It's been bad here in Ireland. I believe in England yesterday, today, they got a respite and a beautiful day of sunshine, so I'm very happy for them. People in the south of England badly needed that, but it's getting shitty again here, and there's a massive storm right off the coast. It's only about a couple of 100 miles now off the coast of Sligo and Donegal, and that's going to crash into us. And right behind that is another one in New Brunswick, and just below that is a monster in the Azores. So, I mean, I've never seen a year like it. It's really incredible. Now, of course, the global warming crowd are going, oh, it's proof, glad Al Gore was correct, Al Gore was right, Al Gore was telling the truth, it's global warming, it's mankind is destroying the planet. Well, and that's the proof of the flooding in Somerset. No, there's a very good article today on that chap's website. I think it's called whatsupwiththat.com. I'll post it later when I find it, where he showed that the flooding in Somerset is deliberate. It's not, it's man-made. It's caused by the government, or I should say psychopathic made. There is, in the north of the county, there is a river that flows into the Bristol Channel. In 1939, when the war was starting off, they built an ordnance factory just beside the river, and the purpose of the ordnance factory was to build large amounts of ammunition for World War II. Now, ammunition is and explosives is a very water-hungry industry. It needs massive amounts of water, and this industry needed 5,000 gallons of water a day, no matter what the weather was. In summer, in winter, you had to have 5,000 gallons of regular water. So they built a tributary off the river that went into the sea to basically feed this hungry ammunition factory. And there was a sluice gate, like a lock, at the front of the river, right beside the Bristol Channel, and that was if the water levels went down in summer, they would close the gate and still be guaranteed 5,000 gallons of water for the munitions factory. So that was the purpose of the sluice gate and the channel. And so, guess what's going on this week? The bloody gate is closed. The bloody gate has been closed since the rains have started. This is deliberate flooding of Somerset. There's no two ways about it. They are purposely flooding large areas of the south of England. Why? Because they don't want people living there anymore. There are all kinds of working documents going right back, and the roots of them are on this Agenda 21, which is a real document which talks about the ideal model for the future is, well, basically what the Nazis wanted. People living in massive cities, the countryside empty, agriculture run by consortiums. Remember, there's no difference between IG Farben and Monsanto. Both companies operate on the same basic principle. They're the ultimate expression of what we call the public-private partnership. And so they're not going to, they see the psychopaths, they learn from their crudeness. In the past, they would go in there at the SSIs and group them, and they would just machine gun murder people in pits, transport them off to death camps, move them into cities, just clear the land. The Russians and the Soviets did the same, the Chinese did the same, and of course the most famous one was Pol Pot, the ultimate sort of like green leader who killed 2 million, nearly 1/3 of the population of Cambodia or Kampuchea by moving them from the capital cities into the countryside to work in agricultural collectives. So they always learn from their crudeness in the past. So instead of gassing us and killing us, they do things like they give us, they sterilize us and so on. They encourage smaller families, all these kinds of things. They don't leave people alone. And so they flood places like Somerset, and then they say, well, you're not going to get flood insurance anymore because because of global warming, you live in a flood zone. And your farm is screwed because when the feet of animals get wet, the hooves get all kinds of diseases and all kinds of ailments, and it costs a fortune for the farmers to keep the cattle and the sheep and the horses and the other animals healthy, because you're going to have to spend a fortune on antibiotics and all kinds of other things and veterinary services. So the farming becomes economically unviable. You're getting sick of your house flooding every year. The transport links are breaking down constantly. I believe I heard on UK column there, the train line between Plymouth and London, which this is a large population down in Plymouth. I think it's like 500,000 people live there. It's broken. It's closed indefinitely. I mean, that's a major rail line in the UK, closed indefinitely. And all the seawall at Dawlish, which is the main train line between Bristol and Penzance and on to London. The old Great Western Line, which is a very well built line by Isambard Kingdom Brunel, the greatest engineer that probably ever lived, and that's all been washed into the sea. That's a catastrophe, and it's a deliberate catastrophe because they're trying to wreck people's qualities of life, to get them out of there and move them into the big cities or the big mega cities, just like the Nazis wanted. They wanted these big, huge capital cities with massive buildings, and if you ever see you want to see the rail network that the Nazis had planned between all over Europe. They were gigantic trains. They were like three times the size of the trains we have now. And the track gauge was something like 10 feet. And they went from like Minsk all the way to like Barcelona. Well, they're building a massive high-speed rail network all over Europe. In fact, the HS2 in the UK is being built at the same time as flooding is happening. Now, they're only building it between the big cities: London, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, and Leeds. It's all in front of your eyes if you look. It's all there. It's all in front of your eyes. It's a strange thing being awakened to all this, because that old adage, those who don't know the past are doomed to repeat it, and it's so true. What things about
when Irish brains are fluoridated, sure there's nothing you can do. When Irish brains are fluoridated, you are a sitting duck for the politicians and their crew. When Irish brains are fluoridated, sure the banker and the politician think it's greed. But when Irish brains are fluoridated, you cannot We laid. Yes, let me tell you about it. They put the fluoride in the water. It ruins your health. It destroys your mind. Makes you a fucking lunatic because you vote for the same assholes over and over again. You get the diseases that only stop at the border, and you never ask yourself why. And the reason is this: because you cannot think straight because they put that shit in your brain. When Irish brains are fluoridated, sure, there's nothing you can't do. But when Irish brains are fluoridated, motherfucker, you are truly screwed.
Because they say things like, I'm against the New World Order, I hate the New World Order, and Jet that right to one. Wasn't Hitler great the way he took on the banks? Now, he's out of your minds. Hitler and the Third Reich were the ultimate expression of the New World Order. What you're shitting bricks about, they delivered it. They gave it. They showed it. Why do you think the likes of the Bush family were so, and the British royals were so impressed with the Nazis? Because that's what they wanted. And here you are sexed up with them because you got an issue with Israel, or you think they took on the banks. They didn't take on the banks. They changed their banking system. What they refused to do was, in the early days of the war, they did not pay back the loans. It was a political tool by the Third Reich to say, it looked like they were saying, screw you to the European bankers and the American bankers. But as soon as they got into power and had a bit of power, they did start paying them back. And another thing too, American, British, French companies like Singer, Ford, DuPont, Standard Oil, these companies, IBM, were still doing trading with the Nazis when Dresden was being firebombed, when Hamburg RAF Hurricanes and Spitfires were flying down the streets in Hamburg, machine gunning women. They could see the whites of their eyes, machine gunning women waiting online for bread during the bombing of Hamburg. These are the kind of things. While that was going on, IBM was still being paid by the Chancellery in Germany. So was Ford. The checks were still being written. Business didn't cease. No matter what, business stayed. And the main reason was for that, you Egypts who are in favor of this kind of Nazi idea, is because there was one aspect the Third Reich did not touch, and that was the judiciary. The German judiciary was left completely untouched by the Nazis. The law of the psychopathic control grid, which was sent down from the Weimar Republic, passed previously on from the Prussian Empire, continued during the Nazis and right on to this day. The judiciary never changed. So you remember that, those of you who see someone in an SS uniform and get a boner and say, oh, he would have took on the New World Order. You remember that one. I'm amazed by you. I'm actually ashamed to be in the same movement as many of you. It doesn't matter. Look, the lesser of two evils is still evil, and two wrongs never makes a right. I'm every so often some muppet comes on my Facebook page and tells me how great Hitler was. And then they go on to post links about how horrible the New World Order is, when it was the same effing thing. This is muppetry on a grandiose scale. This is muppetry beyond muppetry. So please stop that, okay? We don't need revisions of history to bring back monsters. And look, I don't care about things like the Holocaust in terms of the technical specifics of how this, that, and it doesn't matter. People were still rounded up. All kinds of races, religions, gay people, transvestites, Jehovah's Witnesses. Everybody was rounded up. That was a bit different. And they were sent to work in factories owned by IB Farben. It doesn't matter about anything else. That's the end of it. Once you're picked up for being different, game over. End of story. What happens to them from that point on? A gay guy worked to death in an underground V factory, by Werner von Braun of NASA, or someone else being gassed or shot. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, human life was terminated because it didn't fit in with the Nazi psychopathic control grid. So you got to stop that crap now. There's no glamour in that. There's nothing in it. How can you talk about freedom and then be misty-eyed watching a bunch of fucking robots going, doing goose stepping in their SS uniforms? Oh, that was a great society. They would have took on the New World Order. I would have been free under them. Are you out of your bleeding mind? I mean, it's just amazing to me. That's not human individuality. That's the Borg. That's the robot. The first transhumanists were the SS. They were the first transhumanists because they were the first massive cult that switched off the individual personality of people and turned them into Borgs, into robots. Look, you can sit there talking about, they're going to make robots of people that look just like us. You don't even have to be that crude about it. All you have to do is get in there and rewire their consciousness, change their brains, and you get the transhumanist robot. Because you've given them a transhumanist consciousness. It's no longer human. It's a Borg. It's a robot. Nothing changes in this world. The 20th century became the template for where we're heading. Everything you think that's new today, Agenda 21, Monsanto, Agenda 21 is Lebensraum. Monsanto is IG Farben. Racial hygiene is Planned Parenthood. The master race and the Lebensborn is plastic surgery and people trying to look perfect. There's nothing new under the sun. They just change the terms of reference. This is how they play with our minds. The G4S logo today is the swastika. As above, so below. And here's the first song. It's Bobby Gentry and Ode to Billy Joe. And that was Ode to Billy Joe by Bobby Gentry. And interesting song. I love the sound of it. I love the way the strings swirl down. That's a record, folks. That was a big hit in the charts back in the 60s. Could you imagine that in the charts today, a song that interesting? We get Umbrella, Umbrella. Well, what's that EJ? I can't remember her name. That's just always half naked. But anyway, Rhiannon. But yeah, that was pop music back then. That's an example of how far it has fucking fallen. Pardon my French. We have a phone caller on from the 540 area code. It's going to be a quickie because I want to get into the theme of the show tonight. So, hello caller, can you hear me?
Yes, Thomas, it's Kira.
Hey Kira, how's it going? I can hear you perfectly good.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I just got out of the Lego movie with my son, and the bad guy in the movie is called Lord Business or President Business, and when he goes to kill his minion that's been helping him all along, he says, quote, "It's not personal, it's just business."
So don't get worried about it. Don't get worried about it. It's just business. Don't take it too. Just business. Just business. How old is your son?
He's 8.
8. So it's
8.
good that he has you to actually help him to understand those things in different ways.
Exactly, and the whole message of the movie. The whole message of the movie was, in order to be a master builder, you have to be able to build from your imagination without the directions.
Oh, that's kind of sad because that's how Lego used to be by default. When we were kids,
exactly.
Lego was a fantastic box of imagination before the theme kit came out in the early 80s.
Yep.
That's gaslighting, isn't it? After all the years of Lego making theme kits, telling kids, you must make what's on the box. You must make what's on the box. Then they tell the kids, oh, no, don't be hung up on the picture on the box, kids. You know, go mad with your Lego and expand your imagination. Hey, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if they're, you know, I mean, I hate to say like that they've been listening to me, but it's interesting that I was, you know, maybe I don't say they were listening to me, but I do think I do have this ability to sort of, like a lot of artists, to sort of tap into the archetypes right before they happen. And I wonder if that was like, I tap into that somehow. An interesting, that's an interesting one.
And the guy who was the bad guy, he had a lot of psychopathic features as well, and he was really obsessed with controlling the population, and he was obsessed with perfectionism, and it was interesting in that respect. But when that exact line came out, I almost pissed myself.
That's funny. But it's like, it's interesting. I never understood the business rationale behind Lego doing that, because when you think about it, you can only make so many themed kits. Where if you just throw the Lego bricks out there, you can just say, go mad, kids. You can sell to everybody, because not everybody's going to be interested in Star Wars or, you know, Harry Potter or whatever the theme is based on.
Right.
That was a poor marketing idea.
Yeah. But they also have the Lords of Perception to tell you that you do want it, even if you don't. Even if you don't.
And you know something? The other Lego factory is completely automated. There's actually no humans in it except people who fix the machines. It's one of the most automated environments on Earth. Yep. When this radio show is over, people go to look at a TV show that was called How It's Made, and go to How It's Made Lego. And it shows the factory in Denmark, and it's literally, the whole factory is literally a robot. The only human activity in the actual factory is the accounts department, the sales department, and the guys who develop the kits. Apart from that, there's nothing else.
Incredible.
It's incredible. Yeah. 3 million bricks a week they make. So and Lego has become incredibly expensive as well, which is another thing I don't understand. Most of their toys have gone down in price, and they've become incredibly expensive.
Tell me about it.
I need to investigate who owns Lego now. I'm sure it's not the same original Danish family that started it, but I should check out behind it. Yeah, their plastic is non-biodegradable, but that's always been a good thing, because that's why Lego bricks from the 50s. The 50s are still with us.
Yep.
Right. So listen, thanks very much for coming in with that, Kira. I want to get back to the theme, but that was a great interjection. Thanks very much. That's Kira, everybody. It's just business. So yeah, that's Kira from First Nation Contact, which is on TNSR Radio on a Saturday night between 7 and 9, right before the Type 1 Lounge or News Bomb. So Saturday night's becoming a really great night of radio. Oh, speaking of radio, later on this evening, I'm going to have to go for a few hours sleep after this show. I'm going to be on the Truth Frequency radio show talking about comedy and how I use comedy to offset the dark forces in the world. As you know, anyone who's on my Facebook page knows I'm always telling jokes. I'm very interested in comedy. I'm very interested in people. In comedy ideas, I absolutely despise people who do not get comedy, who do not get satire. They have no place in my life, and they have no place in your life either, because these are people who have something seriously profoundly wrong with them. And anyone who uses someone's comedy against them is a Nazi. You heard me correctly. You're a fucking Nazi. Now, the theme of the show today, we played Ode to Billy Joe by Bobby Gentry there. And the lyrics, it's a dark song, but it's not a black song in terms of it's not horrible dark. But I want to talk about the American Gothic Twilight psyche. On my Facebook page today, I put up a picture of that was painted by the frankly brilliant American artist Andrew Wyatt. Now, there's a family called the Wyatt family, and they're in New England, and they paint in a similar kind of style. It's a kind of a dark. spooky, esoteric, supernatural, almost undercurrent, very archetypal, very dreamlike. And both Andrew Wyatt and his son Jamie Wyatt are probably two of the greatest American artists ever. A couple of months ago I did a special on Charles Birchfield, and I talked about his art. He painted the undercurrent of America as well, and he gave the American spirit a reality, a depth of character there. These guys do it the same way. Now, the painting I put up was called Christina's World. Now, it's a beautiful painting, but it's like it tells a story. And when you first look at it, what you see is an attractive young woman who looks like she's lounging in the grass. If anybody's on a Facebook page now, I want you to pull the painting right up now. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going by memory because it's a painting I've studied quite a lot. Now, you're looking at a painting of the back of a woman, and she's looking towards a house at the top of a hill. And it looks like kind of a pastoral, attractive scene. It looks very nice. She looks pretty. Is she waiting on her boyfriend? What's going on? Well, that painting is of a real neighbour of the Wyatts, and she's not lounging in the grass. She has cerebral palsy, and she's trying to claw her way back home to the house on the top of the hill that she can't walk, and the family can't afford a wheelchair. So when I told you that, and you're looking at that painting, hasn't the entire emotional resonance and the entire emotionality of that painting just completely flipped in your consciousness? You'll notice that around the house, the grass has been cut neatly, and there's a very distinct border between the grass where it's been cut and where she is. She's on the rough grass. The rough grass is to imply her vulnerability. She could be easily raped and assaulted and could do nothing about it. She's outside the pale. She's gone beyond where she can be protected. And that's Christina's world. And that totally changes how that painting, from 1 minute, almost the first time you look at it, it almost looks like a Hallmark painting. It just seems like she's waiting for her lover. But then when you realize the backstory was a real woman with cerebral palsy, and that painting is really about her, the vulnerability and danger that she's in, it changes everything. But that flux between the American dream of the initial pastoral scene and the potential horror of the American nightmare, between those two states you have what I call the American twilight. And that's the real America. It's not bad, it's not evil, it's not wonderful, but it's real. And every meaningful act of American art and creativity has come from that American twilight. That parenthesis, that space between the words dream and nightmare, that white space in the middle of those two words, is the America that I personally have a fondness for. And it's the America that's really, really interesting. It's also the America that many of us in the alternative movement, when we talk about things like the films of Stanley Kubrick, or things like that, symbolism, that's all in that area. That's a roadmap. That white space between the words dream and nightmare is a very distinct roadmap. And in there lives the real heart and soul of America. It's where it is. It's in there. All the good stuff is in there. Not in the dream, which is superficial, and not in the nightmare, which is horror. The American consciousness was shifted. You can see American art is very good for studying this aspect. If you look at the paintings of Edward Hopper, another genius, Edward Hopper's paintings of America are so similar in terms of the emotional quality that the Wyatt paintings have, as do the Charles Birchfield paintings have. They're train stations where nobody's waiting for a train. They're gas stations in the middle of nowhere where no one's coming for gas. They're railroad crossings at twilight where there's no train. They're boxcars in the rail yard not moving. Their ships not, they're sailing boats with the mast down. There are lobster pots that are broken. They're all these kinds of things. They're very, very deep archetypes, very deep symbolic things. When Hollywood invented Technicolor films, the Technicolor process of films, they deliberately twisted the American consciousness. You look at, I was talking about this last week, the processing. A gentleman actually wrote to me this week. I meant to have replied to me. I got to get another email, but I will. And he worked for years for, I think it was Kodak, yeah, Kodak Eastman, processing the films. And even they stopped, believe it or not, they have this esoteric code that they use to actually identify the year of film processing. So the actual, on the side of the color of the film strip was an actual esoteric code, like a hieroglyph. It was usually circles and triangles in a different arrangement. I'll do an article about it at some point on the website. Guess what year they stopped? The code ran out, 2001. The same year that HD TV became the norm, everything else. Hades television. High definition really means high brainwashing. But those color films, they created an artificial pastiche of what America meant to be. You saw that with The Wizard of Oz. The beginning starts out in black and white and then it goes into color. That was a deliberate shift in consciousness right in the movie. Disney did the same with their films. The colors were highly accentuated. The scenes were very brightly lit. They were directly lit from frontal lighting. You would not have many long shadows. When you get to America, you realize that America is a land of long shadows because of its latitude in the world. It has shorter days than we do here in Europe, and the shadows are very, very long, making America looking very ethereal. America, when you get to America, is much more ethereal and mystical than the movies portray it as. Well, not until the 70s came along and films like Badlands with Martin Sheen and Sugarland Express with Goldie Hawn. Those films were the first ones to actually show that sort of lighting, how America really makes you feel and really makes you look. The land of long shadows. If I was to become some kind of pagan native and go there, that's what I would call America, the land of long shadows. So it took artists like Edward Hopper to express that sensation, and many of his paintings that were done during the Great Depression, they have long shadows, and there's often people in isolated situations. Someone in a coffee shop having a coffee alone. There's a beautiful painting of a woman in a darkened cinema. She's an usherette, a blonde-haired woman, and she's sitting there and she's lost in her thoughts. Is she pregnant outside marriage? Has her boyfriend left her? Is there something going on? And at the same time, people are inside the cinema watching this projection on the screen. It's stunning. It's incredible stuff. And Georgia O'Keeffe did the same with the shadows. She continued on almost like the emotional conduit of the natives, of the tribes of that part of the Southwest, and brought it into her paintings. You can learn an awful lot. You can learn an awful lot about a society, how it really is, from its artists more than you can ever learn from its entertainment. Remember, when you're watching a film, you're watching entertainment. You're not watching the real thing. You're watching a created, manufactured consciousness. And you'll notice that American films became increasingly garish. There are films that are almost impossible to watch by the time you get to the 1960s, just because of the garish quality of the film processing and the frontal lighting with no shadows and the heavily made up actors. I think examples of that would be films like in the early 60s, Blue Hawaii with Elvis Presley. And it's a mad, 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 mad world, which I think is an awful film. It's not only not funny, it's literally the visual version of, an epileptic falling down a flight of the stairs with a bunch of pots and pans. It's like that. There's nothing subtle about it, and there's no way you can actually pull anything good out of it. It's just horrible. and bombastic and noisy. And American films were like that. And then you had the shift back in consciousness to the twilight. As we're in the American nightmare now of cinema. The American nightmare of cinema really began with all the heavy CGI, films like Independence Day, right onto the Avatar, all the crap we've been subjected to. Again, we're back in the garish, but we're in the dark side, we're in the psychopathic side. In the middle was the glorious age of American cinema, right bang in the middle of that, the Twilight Zone, where stories were told that actually meant something. Began with Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. You had films like Midnight Cowboy. You look at the visual tonal qualities of those films, and you compare them to the films before and after in terms of the subject matter. They had stories to tell. They had meanings in people's lives. Taxi Driver, it's still a very dark film. The Exorcist. The Long Shadows entered the cinema. New directors came in, like Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, who were aware of the use of camera workers, that they had actually grown up being indoctrinated by European film, particularly Italian films like Pasolini, Bellini, and also British films, particularly British war films like When the Day Went, and so on. These film directors grew up with a European consciousness of filmmaking. They brought it into American filmmaking. They encapsulated it in the twilight of American cinema and produced the glory years of Hollywood. The glory years of Hollywood are not the 30s and the 40s. The glory years of Hollywood are between the late 60s and the early 80s. I think after The Breakfast Club, it's very hard to find an American movie that actually has any real meaning to it in that way. So in my taste in films, I'd say the first one would be 1967-ish, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the end of that American cinema twilight, that glorious era, 1985, 84, films like The Breakfast Club. In between, so many amazing movies and meaningful films were made, and that's the way I can best describe what I'm talking about today. That's where the American twilight is. That space between dream and nightmare. We're in the nightmare now. We've been in the nightmare especially since 2001. That's why the films represent. The films say nothing. They mean nothing. They don't touch you on any level. They're just CGI. They're bombastic. Even if they try and have a message, it's not conveyed. It's not conveyed properly. It's crude. It's overt. It doesn't fire at the subconscious. It doesn't fire at you in a meaningful way. You can watch a film from 1973 like The Exorcist and come away with this is a really beautiful story of a mother's unconditional love for her daughter, and two men of the church. No matter how you feel about the Catholic Church at the top, but two ordinary priests who are willing to sacrifice their life to save a child and to give a child back to her mother. On top of all the gore, the head spinning, stabbing herself with the crucifix, and all the other stuff, that story comes flying through from the very middle. That comes flying through. Nowadays, if they made The Exorcist, you'd have all the special effects, and you'd have, like, she'd be, like, having a boob job. The mother would be, like, this, like, flake. They wouldn't have a Catholic priest. You'd have, like, two trendy rabbis called, like, Rabbi JC and stuff like that. And it'd be all stupid. Or you'd have a New Age guru, like, or something like that. And it'd be all rubbish. And the whole reality of the story, not because they're rabbis or anything. I'm just saying, just because they change it in a stupid way. And it'd be all gory and blood and guts, and there'd be no story to it. It would just be bullshit. It would just be bullshit. That's the American twilight. That's where the real story is told. And that's why I put the picture of Christina's world up there, was to express that idea. First, I hit you with the picture. Very nice. I told you the backstory. Very horrible. But that space where you're now thinking, hey, that's interesting. It's interesting how you can tell stories in different ways. That subtext can be sent through. That's what fires your brain. That's what really fires those fucking neurons. That's what really gets you going. Those synapses firing. That's your frontal partitions, and then your consciousness is backfired onto that, and you start, just like I always say, you see the world like a poet. This is why, I mean, I can't watch modern American films. They're just rubbish. I couldn't, you know, I know people have to take their kids to see the films and all that kind of thing. I can't get, the cinema is just too, I mean, and even the way American cinema has taken over everything. You know, we used to make great films in this part of the world. There was England, the UK used to make fantastic movies. We used to make great movies here in Ireland. We had a great film industry here. Same in England, a great film industry. They had a great film industry in Italy, Scandinavia, particularly in Sweden. It's all gone. It's all gone in the Hollywood CGI. It's been absorbed by the Hollywood CGI Borg, the superficial love story. I always think that the archetype for that destruction was that stupid scene in When Harry Met Sally, is that the name of the film, where she has the fake orgasm in the cafe. And it's so stupid. It's not funny, but you're supposed to think it's the funniest thing that's ever happened. And then the woman goes, you know, I'll have whatever she's having, as if it's supposed to be some phenomenal piece of comedy writing and cinematic genius. And it's nothing of the sort. The fake orgasm is really an archetype of the fake movie, of the fake story, of the fake film, with no substance and nothing to tell, because it does not go into the American twilight. It does not go into that part of the subconsciousness. It wasn't a real orgasm. She wasn't being shagged, rogered on the table. She was faking an orgasm for a fake film. And when the woman at the end says, I'll have what she's having, is what she's saying is, that's what the world you're getting. Fake orgasms, fake food, fake stories, fake pop music, fake art, fake politics. That's what that means. So let's, for the next hour after this song, try to look at more deeply this American twilight idea. Like I always said, it doesn't matter if the world is going to shit. You don't have to go to shit. You don't have to do it. Anarchy begins in your own consciousness. Non-compliance begins with, I don't care. This is why I respect drag queens. This is why I respect people who dress up in medieval clothes or whatever their thing is when they get home, because they're getting away from the crap. They're getting away. This is why people who decorate their house in the way they want, the art they want. They try to get back to the 1930s. They're trying to undo the nightmare. They don't want what she's having. They want what they are having.